Hello, 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 hello. So now we're going to continue with problems, not the problems you encounter when you're writing a math exam, not the problems you encounter when your car is breaking down, not the problems when you encounter when you walk in the street and a bird shits on your head and you don't have a tissue. Those things are easy to fix. We're talking about economic problems, specifically South Africa's economic problems, and these are a bit harder to fix. So I covered some in the previous section. Now let's cover some more. Essentially, let's talk about currency volatility. So we spoke about FDI volatility. FDI volatility, the basically the foreign volatility, the investment. Like, there's a lot of things that spook investors. Like, those of you who have a lot of money, who are investors, you will know this. Like, you don't want to waste your money, despite the thought of the blood sucking, sitting in a dark corner, conspiring, smoking a cigar in a whiskey, blue tie with a red, blue suit with a red tie, balding, gray hair on the side. Those are not, always the people running industry, and they don't always have black hearts, or, they're not children of the devil or nonsense like that. For fuck's sakes, that would be such a silly conspiracy. I'm not going to even waste my breath on it. But some of them have good hearts. It's just, when you are one of these people, quite often you work for your money. You took a lot of risk. You've worked very hard, 16 hours a day for 40 years, whatever. You have like a broken marriage because of this, like you never see your children, like you have stress, chronic stress, maybe you got an illness because of this chronic stress. You had to deal with tough situations in your life, you had to fire people, maybe you saw some of your employees die, you had to go to their funerals. It's not easy. And all the time you have to think critically, you have to think on your feet, you have to think quickly, you have to weigh up risk, probabilities, your competitors are out to get you, you have to think about what their next move will be, playing, financial and, strategic and technical risk, chess, like you have to do all of these things at once. And, not all of us can do that. I can't do that. Like, I'm just going to admit it straight away. If I have to run Tesla or Microsoft for just a week, I'll end up a nervous wreck if I don't, and I'll cost the company a huge amount of money. There'll be probably like investor flight from the company. Like, the stock price will fall like 50%. The only reason the stock price won't fall 80% is probably the people who still hold on to the stock price of 50 will know that, okay, the company, the board of directors will replace me. Let's just be clear about this. And 99.99% of you out there are the same as me. Let's don't lie to ourselves. We're not all of us are cut out to be like this. And there's no shame in it. Just like I said in the previous video, there's no shame to cleaning a floor or working on a farm or whatever. Work is work, and like there's dignity in work, and that's why all workers should be respected and treated well as human beings and stuff like that. I know, like, some people, there's power dynamics. Some people with more power and more money may bully or take advantage of workers. But the fact of the matter is, in South Africa, we have highly aggressive unions. And I mean aggressive, like, for example, NUMSA, the National Union of Mine and Steel Workers of South Africa. They come with these strikes, and then it's often at a very inconvenient time for the company. They always ask for salary increases above inflation. Okay, now that sounds reasonable if you're a Swedish person listening to this, but do business in Vietnam, do business in China, do business in Thailand. They don't ask for this kinds of shit. Like basically, your job's your job, the money you get's the money you get, okay? Like if it's inconvenient for you to work, they change your job. Like, or get a side hustle. Like South Africa is the only place on earth where there is this like massive, sense of victimhood, and like I'm not saying all workers, I'm not saying all like blue collar workers are that, or I'm not saying all people in a union are like that. And this is actually the truth. Like it's a minority of people. If you look at NUMSA, the National Union of Mine Workers of South Africa, they've got 30,000 members. Okay, South Africa is a country of 55 million people. I don't know how much it will be by the time this video gets aired, but when you watch it, 60 million people. Now, NUMSA goes on a super aggressive strike. They block the factory, they block the factory entrances, so no one can enter or leave. So there's no production is being done. They threaten the workers who are not unionized, or who are unionized but who want to go to work because they need a full month's salary. They threaten anyone of management they can see. Like they threaten the security guards, like guarding the factory. Often they will go in and break and vandalize something if they can go in. So, like they create these volatile situations. And why should a union with 30,000 members have such disproportionate power over a country of 55 million people? I don't think it's fair. Just like a small group of politicians like eating their asses off, like having, $2 million trips to Japan and back, for 3 days. Just like that's unfair, like these small amount of blue collar workers keeping the country hostage is also unfair. Like I think at one instance, like there was a truckers strike. A truckers strike. They blocked the N3 highway. Now, for those of you who don't know, the N3 highway is the main highway between Johannesburg and Johannesburg and Pretoria and Durban. Now, Johannesburg and Pretoria is about 50 kilometers away from one another, and Durban's the main port city. Now, if you go and you block that highway, jack shit is happening in Gauteng because they can't get any manufacturing output. Their products can't go to Durban port to be exported. Okay, so it's a huge problem. Like there's you can try to go through Mozambique, but it's a very small highway. It like circles up, and it's like Mulholland Drive. Those of you who've driven to Maputo before from Joburg, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like Mulholland Drive. You can't send all of Joburg's exportation trucks to Maputo and everything that we need in Joburg from Maputo to Johannesburg. Maybe we should develop that highway, by the way, if we get investment money, which I spoke about in the earlier video. But like freaking, that's a huge problem, okay? Then they get aggressive. The workers often use guns. And one of the biggest strikes we have, and I'm in two minds about this strike. Look, first and all, again, I won't say first and all of most, but I believe you should have the right to strike. If my boss tomorrow gives me some retarded, some super unreasonable thing to do, which is unfair, and I tell him, like, I don't want to go to work tomorrow, fine. but then I stay at my house. I don't like go and, I guess I can pick it, but unless you're in China, then you can't pick it. The police will come and pick you up. Or Vietnam. That's the thing. Vietnam, China, those places, you can't pick it. Like your disabling industry. So they will just stop you. South Africa, you can pick it, but later I just stay at home. And then my boss either he doesn't pay me, or he fires me after a while. Now in South Africa, like the labor laws are very, very pro-worker, and this is a problem. I'll speak about it later. Now, what this comes down to, like with the deindustrialization, is companies are scared to invest in South Africa. And as I mentioned before, countries like Colombia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Peru, we can't even compare ourselves to Mexico anymore. But let's say Romania, whatever, these kinds of places, investors then look at them. Okay, do these places have these conditions? Yes or no? And you won't have it. So the investor will be, okay, my factory is safer in Colombia than it is in South Africa. I'm putting my money there. Because of, let's say, this aggressive labor conditions. Now getting to okay, that's like investment volatility is okay, yeah, and then there's obviously corruption when there's a massive corruption scandal closely linked to the operations of industry, then that will shock capital. Like when there's a massive currency fluctuation that shocks capital. When there's bad weather, South Africa has some bad weather now and then because of global warming. It will shock capital. When they threaten to one of the key factors for a successful nation is strong institutions. When they threaten, the government threatens institution, that threatens investment or foreign direct investment. It creates volatility. And then when they threaten property, like any kinds of property, but land in particular. Now, look, I know the history of land. I know there's a lot of criminality that went into acquiring it. I know there's a lot of sadness, hurt, and crimes against humanity associated with the current land system in South Africa. But bottom line, in the book, How Nations Fail, the economist, Armenian-American economist, something Megdulu or something. Just look for Google the book, The Fall of Nations. Sorry, If Nations Fail, Why Nations Fail. And the second book he wrote is The Narrow Corridor. I recommend reading both. And then you will see what's really happening, why countries fail, or how do you succeed. It's a nice book. It shows you how they fail and also how you can succeed. Now, if you want problems with investment, you should tamper with property rights. Property rights is is very important, and that's getting back to the institution. I don't know if I've covered institutions yet, but it's the same thing. Countries that's very successful, like the Netherlands, they have had strong institutions for a very, very long time. South Africa had a very good anti-corruption unit called the Scorpions, and they would arrest people left, right, and center. And in a bad way, not like the Gestapo. They would find someone who stole money, then they would arrest them, and that person would be off to court. And they worked too well. They were super effective. And then Jacob Zuma closed them. Once again, the Ayeye president closed the Scorpions. Why did he close the Scorpions? Ask yourself that question. There's only one answer. Then we go on to currency volatility. The rand's one of the most volatile currencies amongst the emerging markets. The drivers are political uncertainty, global commodity prices, capital flight during interest hikes abroad, and the impacts are imported inflation, investment planning, and difficulties, increased costs of servicing dollar dominated debt. So, with currency volatility, I feel there's less you can do. The only thing you can really do is to get politicians to say kind of investor-friendly things or reacting like stable people. South African politicians have a strong inclination not to act as stable people. Very, very occasionally on the right wing, you will have someone who says something that's very stupid, and very frequently on the hard left side of politics, some politician will say something massively stupid, and then that impacts the currency. And commodities, obviously. Now, look, currency, you're kind of prone to currency moves in any case, and sometimes it's good if a currency is like appreciated, and sometimes it's good if it's like depreciated. But these things should be carefully considered, because remember, if you just depreciate the currency, imports become very expensive. If you appreciate it, if you depreciate it, imports become very expensive, but you can, what's the opposite? You can export. I'm not an expert on currency, but like, I feel with currency, like there's a bit less you can do. You're a bit of a victim, but there's still quite a bit that you can do to protect yourself from this. Then we get to commodity dependence. South Africa's economy is still heavily reliant on the export of unprocessed natural resources, like the lack of value add through beneficiation, global climate policy risks to coal and platinum, and declining demand for traditional minerals. As economies globally evolve into more like either more efficient kinds of industries, or if they fall away totally and get replaced by, with creative destruction, they could get replaced by something totally different. South Africa has zero protection against something like that. So, all these people, I'm going to say it once again, like the people who say, but South Africa is such a rich country because we have gold. No, that's like something from Austin Powers 3, like that's not how it works. Like these things fluctuate extremely quickly. A mine can become unprofitable. Suddenly it can become profitable too. But, metals are always recycled. And we don't ever, like, I spoke about the square of like how your economy should be like diversified. Ideally, like go look at, I think, Uruguay. Go and look at Uruguay's economy, like their square of how diversified the economy is. Like you want to be something like that, where you're not dependent on one single thing. So if one single thing gets kneecapped, you're okay. South Africa's not like that. Then we have water insecurity. So South Africa faces rising water scarcity due to infrastructure failures, pollution, and climate change. Over 40% of municipal water is lost to leaks. Water-stressed areas include the Eastern Cape, Free State, and Limpopo. So South Africa, the biggest problem is infrastructure decline. Infrastructure was built many, many years ago. Let's say 30 years ago or whatever. And look, these things are usually it's just concrete, reinforced concrete or clay, or I don't know, I guess it's not clay, reinforced concrete. And those things, after a while, the water seeps through the concrete and then it touches the metal inside, and the metal starts expanding because of the rust. And then the pipe, starts breaking. And you need to at one stage just remove the entire pipe and put a new one in. Or if there's valves or connectors, whatever, these things need to be maintained, either fixed or replaced. So that's what you need to do. And this stuff was just never done. And I mean, this number is shocking. 40% of municipal water lost to leaks. So this is your valuable product. We're not talking about water from the dam. We're talking, or a reservoir. We're talking about potable water. And this is one of the, if you want to really see municipal downfall in South Africa, go and have a look at how they handle water. The true basket cases of municipalities in South Africa are usually the ones with the greatest water problems. And the politicians who run these municipalities are just fucking useless. I have seen a TV program where the municipal councillor took one of the water trucks to fill up a swimming pool. That's what she did. Can you imagine? And she was undeterred by media and neighbors coming to take photos and pictures of it. The level of arrogance, is astounding. And so, if I haven't mentioned, I don't think politics is one of the key things here. It's a key chapter in this, because economics and politics often go together. But essentially, our politicians are useless. Then they hire people that's super incompetent. And I'm always going to hammer on these four: effectiveness, efficiency, productivity, and meritocracy. We do not have enough of these people. Even if you don't have a degree, someone who has all four of these attributes will go to night college, figure out what the hell he or she should do, and do it. That's just how these people work. We don't have enough of these people, and that's why we're leaking so much water. And then there's obviously the added risk now of global warming. I'm not going to go into the politics of global warming. All I'm saying is the weather is changing. It's getting hotter. It's getting drier in South Africa. We're getting less rain. I remember when I was very small, it rained frequently. Now it's not raining as much anymore. And that's a big problem. So then at the very least, handle your potable water. I mean, potable water is such a commodity, and it should be seen as a commodity, that even in ancient religions, water is seen as this holy thing. You wash, Jesus' feet got washed in water, or he walked on water, or water is life, or, whatever, these kinds of things. Water is holy. And if you can't use, or rather, let's just break it down to economic terms, because there's a video about economics. If you can't treat water like a commodity as it is, especially if it's a value-added one in the form of chlorinated potable water, you have a huge problem. And yeah, like we have the areas that's even more prone to drought, like the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, Free State, and Limpopo, and we don't have any desalination plants. In some cases, we don't have boreholes, but in other cases, there is boreholes. Some of them are vandalized. However, in some cases, boreholes are not viable because the water level is already too low. Now, this would normally not be such a great problem. However, no one thought about it. No one did planning to say, okay, by the year 2025, we're going to deplete the water level. Time to move 80% of these villagers away because, like, they won't have water. None of this was taken into consideration. Next, the informal economy dominance. The informal sector represents nearly 25 to 30% of the workforce, but is low productivity and poorly integrated with formal value chains. Self-employed with little, common features are that they're self-employed with little capital. They have a lack of legal protections or access to finance, and they're concentrated in urban townships and rural settlements. The impact is a weak tax-based revenue. They have precarious livelihoods, and it's a limited upward mobility. They've got limited upward mobility. Now, look, this is a problem. This is a good thing in the sense that at least there's people who go out and try to make money. It's people who haven't yet given up on life. So this is like very good, but the problem is they don't get the state support they need, or at least the infrastructure they need. Simple things, like let's say if crime can be reduced by 80%, then these people don't need to worry about their stock being stolen, for example, or them being robbed. Rather, in South Africa, if you get something it's stolen, you're lucky. You know, most likely you'll get robbed. And for them to get finance is next to impossible. So a lot of people are against a state bank. I'm also against the state bank, not because it's socialist. I'm against the state bank because of the corruption. If there was no corruption, or rather the culture of corruption, it's no longer a phenomenon, it's now a culture. Because of this culture of corruption, if such a fund was created to help these nano-entrepreneurs onto their feet, well, actually they're already on their feet, but to help them grow their businesses, this may be the entry point, for them to go to the middle class by themselves as business people. But the private sector, it's not. They're too high risk for the private sector, and there's no sustainable state sector that can support them. Now, I'm saying non-sustainable because the money of such a state bank will be stolen. I guarantee you, it's not a theory. Like if they steal money from every state institution, do you seriously think they're not going to steal money from, like, the state bank? Of course they will. Then we have spatial inequality in the urban and the urban-rural divide. Economic opportunities remain heavily concentrated in metropolitan regions, with rural and township areas lagging behind. There's high transportation costs from peri-urban settlements to jobs, limited infrastructure and internet access in rural areas, and land tenure complexity in the rural investment. So yeah, a lot to unpack here. Personally, I'm in favor of moving more people to rural areas, in the sense that our cities require so much, not just maintenance, it requires so much infrastructure to simply be rebuilt. And also of the water stress. The water stress, it's easier to get water in the countryside, and also energy stress. It's easier to have your own small solar panel on your plot of land in the countryside somewhere than it is in the city. So the thing, however, is that the roads are very poor. Like I spoke in the video about farm attacks. One of the reasons they're so high, the rate, is that the police don't have 4x4s. You know, they've got normal vehicles, and some of South African roads are so bad you can only really drive them with agricultural equipment or a 4x4. So, you know, normal people can't move to the countryside, and it's very difficult if you have a normal vehicle to do business in the countryside. Investment as well. If you want to if you want to put up a piece of infrastructure in the countryside, you'll also need like a pretty mean truck to like go there, you know, to put up a cell phone tower, which brings us to communication. There isn't enough communication in the countryside. It's very difficult to electrify this communication side because a lot of cables, the copper cables, get stolen. So because of the value, copper is so valuable, and it's relatively easy to steal copper, like because people don't, you know, they don't realize the crime has happened like for quite a while you just roll up this copper quickly. This is very unpopular. Elon Musk is not popular in South Africa at the moment, but we need something like Starlink, satellite communication, in South Africa to make the urban areas like able to communicate with the rest of the country. Because South Africa is beautiful. Like, there's so many places you can go. You know, if you open the countryside totally, you'll probably be able to get like foreign, startup guys, or these digital nomads to come to South Africa just to be in these like remote areas, and they just need a PC to work. In fact, it's so bad. If you go to Skukuza, which is in the Kruger Park, and that's like one of the prime tourism spots in the country, the internet is ridiculously slow. You know, like you won't get off your phone, you basically don't get internet. If you go to the restaurant area, there is internet, but it's also slow. At least when I was there, and I was there recently. Like, the internet speeds are ridiculously slow. They're very slow to, like across the country, the telecommunications companies are very slow to roll out fiber. So many people, getting back to the joke that I made earlier, you know, it's not my joke, it's a country joke. If you want to make money in South Africa, do the shit that the government won't do. Like any service where the state has failed, any piece of infrastructure that the state has failed, do that thing, make that thing, build that thing, design that thing, run that thing, maintain that thing, and you'll make money. That's a promise. so getting back to Starlink, you can run Starlink like that tomorrow, and why isn't it run like that tomorrow? Is because of all this stupid red tape in South Africa. I don't think I have it here as a list, but I think it is like a sub-heading somewhere. But there's red tape for almost everything in South Africa. If you have to wait for a passport, like I was in a foreign country, I was in Chile, and I need to get a new passport. It took almost a year. Yeah, I'm serious. It took almost a year for me to get a new passport from South Africa to Chile. It's ridiculous. And that's just for the individual. Like when it comes to companies, it takes months to start up a company. Whereas if you go to Burundi, 1 day. Single place you go to, and it takes 1 day to open a company. So the government just has to agree to not kick Starlink in the balls, and we can have Starlink tomorrow. Now, I know it's very expensive, but businesses who are highly dependent on internet, it's ideal for them. If you want to limit it for the individual because you're an asshole government, I can still understand that, but don't limit it for businesses. That's stupid. These people create growth. They need internet. And especially if we're going to talk about rural development. As soon as you're off the internet these days, if you're doing farming, if you are doing some work in a village, if whatever, that information stops without internet, which can be easily fixed using Starlink. Then we have a skills mismatch and labor market rigidities. So the labor force lacks critical skills needed by key industries, while rigid regulations diversify hiring. So it sounds a bit similar to the earlier video, but there's a bit of a few differences here. So we have an oversupply of graduates in the humanities and a shortage of STEM graduates in art and artisanal trades. There's a mismatch between the so-called TVET curricula and the private sector demand. So the problem is twofold. Parents, families, these people have romanticized the humanities in the brains of these children, or the children has done it themselves, or TV has done it, or computer games or whatever. And now they're set on studying this one thing that's useless. Look, I'm sorry for saying humanities is useless. It is, art has a very important space in society. It does. We're humans. We have created arts for thousands of years. Sociology is needed for both economical and political input. But okay, you need one sociologist for, let's say, a company of 1,000 people. You don't need 250. So this is the problem. And the government did it as well. The government didn't proactively see that, oh shit, there's 5,000 people who want to study sociology at this one company, or just a 3-year bachelor's in psychology. There's freaking thousands of them, and we only have 300 people who want to study engineering. Think about that. And they did nothing to remedy that skill. And some of the things just require a bit of creativity. Now, obviously, someone who want to study sociology like people, why don't you push them into counseling rather? Like push them into a dedicated counseling thing, which you may actually do at the college. You don't maybe even need a university. And we do need counselors, like because of the serious domestic violence, femicide. I don't want to do it, but I can talk about very dark things that happens in South Africa towards children, about children and women, and I'm not going to go into it, but like we need counselors for that. So rather, take these people who want to do a PhD and push them into that direction where they can still make money and be extremely useful to society. In any case, next one, the barriers are complex. Some of the barriers in the labor market is that it's also complex to dismiss someone. The sector is highly unionized, and there's rigid minimum wages and low productivity environments. I'm sorry, but here I'm going to go. I have to go full neoliberal. This shit is nonsense. Like, basically, it's none of the government's business for how much money. If I want to work, it's none of the government's business for how much money I want to work for, including nil. That sounds stupid, doesn't it? But I'll tell you why it's not. If you are unemployed, for most of us, just in the case of a year, can you imagine someone sitting in a South African slum who hasn't been employed for 10 or 15 years? They would give everything to have to work for zero compensation, but then they learn something they can put on their CV and therefore become employable, and that choice is up to the individual. If someone doesn't want to do it, it's fine. But if someone does want to work for a lower wage, just to work, if someone does want to, work in an environment where he knows, if I don't perform, I get fired, in 24 hours, people will probably do better in any case, but the government tried to please everyone with the constitution and our rights records and everything. So they gave disproportional amount of rights to workers. So companies, and this comes back to investment, companies are scared to hire because they know it's difficult to get rid of you. You'll just sit there as if you're a truly incompetent person, you'll just sit there for months, using up their money, while you're playing on Facebook or whatever. And that is, unacceptable. But my main point here is it's none of the government's business if I want to work. That's my right. So they should just, leave anyone be who wants to be left alone to work, they and the unions. And if the unions give me any shit about this, then the police should come and protect me. The police, not like a lawyer. The impact is structural unemployment, informal employment growth, and the declining global competitiveness. So in Vietnam, you don't have this nonsense. In Colombia, you don't have this nonsense. That is why they are doing better than us economically. It's there's many reasons. Next up, the brain drain and skilled worker immigration. South Africa is losing skilled professionals to countries with better pay, stability, and opportunity. Some affected fields are medicine, engineering, IT, academia, and finance. The drivers for these are crime and safety concerns, a tax burden and infrastructure decay, and political uncertainty. Now, the problem is the tax system in South Africa. As soon as a doctor or engineer make a lot of money in South Africa, but they don't make as much money, as what people think. The guy can't really afford a BMW 7 Series. He can do maybe a 5 Series. He can live in, average upper class like neighborhood. He can't live in the upper class neighborhood. They don't make as much money. That's like a fact. And I know, I was an engineer. So you need to really keep your finger on the pulse when it comes to tax with regards to people who are prone to immigrate. Like there has to be some census or like informal, anonymous inbox or something at companies where these people can submit their complaints and the reasons for them, and then somehow try to optimize the tax burden. Political uncertainty again as well. Like we have politicians in South Africa who's so extremely crazy, who are so extremely radical. They scare people, and I think they want to scare people, just to project power. And what they don't realize, however, these clever politicians, is that if you scare someone, they will react. They will either fight back or they will flee, just like humans did 100,000 years ago. Fight or flight. In this case, flight, because it's the easiest. And then, because why do you have to work under all of these? And I'm not even finished with this list yet. Why do you want to work in a place like this if you can work in Australia, with the same kind of weather, and that's just a much better country? Yeah, it'll be way more expensive, but you will live in a socialist state where you don't have to spend money on education and like healthcare. So then a lot of your money you don't even have to worry about. You're not just giving it away to the state for no effectiveness. A lot of South Africans don't have a problem being taxed, and being taxed highly, if the services were delivered. If there was a good medical system, they wouldn't have minded. They do mind when they don't get something in return. That's the problem. The impacts, once again, loss of tax revenue and human capital, a decline in service delivery quality, and difficulty in building a knowledge economy. So South Africa is, with this deglobalization and stuff, we are kind of ideally placed to become a service-based economy, but we can't, because these IT people and engineers are leaving. And service delivery quality is going down. The doctors, now there's fewer doctors working in state hospitals. These people work themselves to death. They have a lot of stress. I've spoken to some of them. It's like hell on earth. If you're a nurse or a doctor, it's like hell on earth to work in a public hospital. They're not even safe, mate. Like the hospitals are attacked by criminals. And once again, I can tell you a couple of dark stories of what happened in hospitals. I'm not. You can do that research by yourself. But instead of sending, let's say, a few army troops, like 5 army troops to each hospital, the government does nothing because they don't deem this as a problem, whereas it's a huge problem. That's why people are leaving. That's why we are growing weaker. Next up, the declining public health system. Okay. The public healthcare system is overburdened and under-resourced, impacting population health and productivity. Aging infrastructure and broken equipment, staff shortages and low morale, inefficiencies in procurement and logistics. South African state hospitals are a mess. And for example, the equipment is really bad. I once went to a music festival and I broke my ankle and I had to go for an x-ray. It was like in this rural area. And yeah, like the guy came out, they had to call him from home because it was a very small hospital. And the x-ray machine only barely worked. Where he could tell me, okay, it's not broken, it's cracked, but you should go back to the city and have another one taken, because I don't know, I can't see anything I can see very little from the machine. So, the doctor was very good. His equipment was shitty, and it's not his fault, it's the government, because it's a state hospital. Safety, like at the hospitals, or rather the, loss of morale. Like, if you go to a state hospital, it's not computerized. It's just a bunch of paperwork. People have to wait in long lines. And people who work in health are people with a very high level of empathy, of human empathy. That's what drew them into the position in the first place. Like especially with doctors and nurses, but even probably your administration staff as well. And not only do they have to deal with all of these people standing in super long queues, they can't deal with them with using computers. They have to turn away people because they don't have medication. Like quite often, they can't give people medication for their mental health. They can't give people medication for HIV/AIDS very often, and that affects their morale. Like it's very. Can you imagine like going through all of this? Once again, inefficiencies in procurement and logistics. Logistics in South Africa is extremely poor. Like getting something from point A to point B, there's always going to be a problem. Like in the last election, someone got lazy and he threw a bunch of ballot boxes into a river gorge. And initially people thought that this is like election tampering until the police thoroughly investigated the case and they realized, no, the guy was just lazy. He was working overtime. He didn't want to. He wanted to go and drink beer. So he just decided to get rid of the ballot boxes. You see, this is the people we are working with. Because of this broken health system, there's a higher disease burden and mortality, increased reliance on private care, and poorer educational and economic outcomes linked to health. So yeah, if you look at South Africa, mortality at birth, the age to population reaches, you'll see that it's pretty low. Sometimes it's lower than that, I think, of Mozambique and Botswana, which are also African countries. And now they want to bring in something called the NHI, which is something like Obamacare, which is a very good idea on paper. But once again, corruption. If you're a socialist, and I'm a bit of a socialist, I can agree with the system. But I have to go full neoliberal on this one because the money for this NHI will be stolen. That's a fact. And then no one gets taken care of. So that's a big problem. Declining public education quality. So we spoke about education in general. Let's get into the quality. Public schooling, especially in rural and township areas, suffer from poor quality and oversight, lack of textbooks and overcrowded classrooms, undertrained teachers and weak administration, corruption in school infrastructure tenders. Just like do yourself a favor, look at a YouTube documentary of this. There's so many videos and photos of broken down rural schools in South Africa, where people have no resources. And then, like, there's often attempts by the government to break or to interfere with the governance of good schools, like who's running well. Like as I said earlier, if you want to do something, if you want to make money in South Africa, do something the government can't. That includes education. However, often when you have something that works well, now the government wants a cut or a piece, or they want credit or whatever. So so they can win the next election. They just want to win the next election for two reasons: to make money and to avoid prosecution for corruption crimes already committed. It's just so sad. Like the kids. So I have seen pictures, videos, actually, of kids going to school. Kids walk sometimes 10 kilometers in South Africa to get to a school, to one of these shitty schools. I'm not talking about they walking to a private school with aircon and a computer center. I'm talking about they walking to a shitty school with just a roof, a pit latrine, a few chairs, a few desks, and one teacher that has to teach like 10 subjects. That's what they're going to. Now, remember, those 10 kilometers isn't like, a tar road. It is like quite often a dirt road where you have to walk through the African bush. And the African bush, there are animals living there. There are fences you have to cross. There are rivers you have to cross. And I have seen a video of kids going through a river. They have to take off all their clothes so their school clothes doesn't get wet. And they have to walk through a river like this, like you would see in some 19th century movie or something, to not get wet. And then obviously the river fluctuates, season to season, and kids drown. It's not uncommon to hear of school kids drowning in South Africa because they were forced to cross a river to get to school. Not uncommon. Luckily, it doesn't happen all the time, but, if the mere fact that, there's a single story about this, and there is multiple, shows you in what state of public education we find ourselves in. The consequences are high dropout rates by grade 9 to 11, persistent underperformance in international assessments, and basically these kids can't go to university. Their marks are too low. If they somehow get to university, then the university has to support them in absolutely every way, because they are kids who come from nothing. It's very sad. Next, the youth unemployment crisis. South Africa has among the highest youth unemployment rates globally, contributing to economic stagnation and unrest. Over 40% of youth aged 15 to 34 are not in education, employment, or training. So 40% just have to go out and hustle, whatever that means, trying to do an odd job, trying to sell something on a street corner. They have no choice. The drivers of this is lack of internship, apprenticeship, and entry-level job creation, poor career guidance, and limited exposure to work environments. So yeah, you don't have training, and also people won't give you a chance, neither the government nor the private sector. So also the government doesn't make it easier for the private sector. Maybe if they gave the private sector, an incentive, like a tax break, saying like, look, if you take 100 of these totally unskilled kids and you give them a job, any kind of job, and you find them useful, we will give you the power to fire them as well if they're naughty. But if they're useful, keep them, and we will give you a tax break if you keep, let's say, X amount. If you keep 50%, we'll give you a tax break. But the government can't think that far. Next up, energy insecurity and load shedding. Eskom, that is the state energy supplier, Eskom's inability to supply consistent power cripples production, investment, and daily life. Here's some of the stats. Up to 10 hours of power cuts daily during the peak crisis periods. Over 300 billion rand in fiscal support provided since 2008. So, two things here. Here we have a utility, like this 10-hour power cut is what I believe they call stage 6 load shedding. So for 10 hours you don't have power. So like if it's on a hot day, your food will get spoiled. So you can imagine and there's already serious food inflation in South Africa. So you can imagine what it does to restaurants. That's why restaurants, these days you have to have a generator. If you have a business, you need a generator. Because if you don't have a generator, your business essentially stops working. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is. Absolutely, it doesn't. If it's a supermarket, a petrol station, a fish and chip shop, a bakery, IT maintenance company, you need a generator. Now, they tried to fix it. Remember, it's a state entity by pumping 300 billion rand into it. Now, over various time periods, like since 2008, it didn't work. Like the entity didn't improve. Once again, this can be attributed to Jacob Zuma, the Ayeye president, where this money was just stolen, or it was given to friends to do contracts to deliver coal. I believe that was the Gupta brothers, and what they will do is they will deliver coal, but then it will be like bauxite or, something wet coal or something that you can't really use. They will deliver to the power stations, and then the power stations will break down. And in other cases, like to get tenders, they would actually sabotage the power station. They would break something on purpose, so that they can get a tender for people to come out to fix it. And that's another way to make money. By the way, if you want to steal in South Africa, it's also very easy because of the police just have their hands full. The chances of being caught is low. I'm not encouraging you to steal in South Africa at all. I'm just saying, that possibility is there. The impact is essentially a decline in industrial output, damage to appliances and small businesses, and investor flight due to energy unreliability. Yeah, so energy, there was this Chinese minister of economic development or Minister of Planning. And he came up with a very interesting metric to measure the Chinese economy. And he came up with just two inputs. One was how much freight is being moved by rail, how many megatons of freight are being moved by rail every year or every quarter, and how much electricity, gigawatts, are being used every quarter. That's how they measured it. And that's economic growth. You need energy to grow. And if you don't have it, or if it's not provided cheaply, you won't grow. That's why China's building coal stations all the time. And it's not just coal. China's building nuclear stations at an insane tempo. Go and have a look on the internet about how many nuclear stations China are building. In fact, China's rapidly emerging as one of the key leaders in nuclear development, simply because they've already built so many of the things. South Africa has one, and we can't afford more because of our fiscal deficit, as I mentioned in the previous video. So I would have said go nuclear, but we can't because of money, which we don't have. That is a big problem. Then, with regards to the maintenance, the appliance damage, when you suddenly switch voltage on and off, there's a voltage spike. And that is very bad for a electrical motor, is to have that voltage spike. And then you lose additional money. Now, luckily, I think some of these modern versions have some protection. Also, like most families have voltage protection these days. Like as soon as they put in, they give you a solar panel with a battery, they put in voltage surge protection for if the grid goes back on again. Then infrastructure decay. Critical infrastructure from roads to rail, water and ICT is deteriorating due to negligence and corruption. The symptoms are road networks in disrepair with potholes in urban and rural areas. Rail transport, especially passenger lines, PRASA, is near collapse. Water pipe burst and leaking reservoirs are common. So, once again, infrastructure. I once played this computer game, and one of the biggest, there was like three things you do: agriculture, health development, for educational development, and infrastructure. And if you don't build up all for the people going to revolution. Infrastructure is so important because that's just how civilizations are built. Any one of you who have played Sid Meier's Civilization will know this. You first start building basic huts for people to live in. Then you build a street. Then you build a place to store your food. Then you build shops, and you build latrines, whatever, I forgot the game. But in any case, South Africa has a general infrastructure collapse, and it's very bad. And they always have plans, to fix it, but they don't have, they talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Essentially. Hopefully, I'm a perennial optimist, actually. All of this sounds very negative, but I am an optimist, and I think we will get a government where this will start changing. It won't change overnight. A lot of right-leaning people think it will change overnight. No, it's not going to change overnight. It's not how the real world works. You have to wait. Look, it took it took the architects of apartheid 50 years to create apartheid, 50 years. And they did a lot of damage along the way. Damage we see until this day. Damage we'll probably see 200 years from now. The ANC, to further destroy this country, has done it over a period. Some people will say 35 years since they took over from the apartheid government. But as I mentioned in the previous video, apartheid government was broke, so it doesn't count. They had to restart. I would say Thabo Mbeki, President Thabo Mbeki, built this country. If you want to, like in the US, you have a founding father. Well, if Mandela was the founding father of South Africa, then Thabo Mbeki was the building father of South Africa. And all that Thabo Mbeki did was undone by the Ayeye president called Jacob Zuma. And you are more than welcome to start a discussion with me about this, because I have numbers. And I would like to see your numbers too, because maybe my numbers are fake. And then you can give me some references and I can correct my work, because I don't want to lie on the internet. Like, maybe I should delete this video. I don't want to say anything bad about Jacob Zuma if he was a good president. Jesus Christ, no. In any case, infrastructure decay. Basically, trains. Do you know how dangerous trains are in South Africa? About when they actually run, and that is seldom. Taking a passenger train can be a very I think the Western Cape is still a bit safe. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't live in the Western Cape. But taking a train, a passenger train in Gauteng is a very dangerous prospect. I can tell you a story about a woman I know, but it's too dark. I can't tell you that. That has happened on a train. And I won't go onto a train. I'd rather take a donkey cart to get to my destination before I get onto a South African passenger train. But that is just how it works. Then the infrastructure carrying these dangerous trains are in a state of near collapse. And this affects all aspects of business. It disrupts trade and daily commuting. It reduces access to services in underserved areas. So, yeah, whenever we get some kind of disaster, like a flood or a drought, the damage you see on TV was actually a large part, the lives lost, was actually because the first line of responders couldn't get to the area on time because of the bad roads. Remember, South Africa doesn't have 10,000 helicopters like Norway or Sweden. We make do with what we have. And essentially, this costs lives. The fact that the urban and the suburban areas and the rural areas are not properly connected, and the roads just decay. When I actually build one, by the way, it also takes forever, God knows why. Another thing, potholes. Now, I've heard this argument, and I've heard it many times. Potholes are a white person's problem. Okay. A pothole will affect anyone who drives through it. A pothole isn't racist. A pothole is just this thing. It's not an anomaly. It's just this thing because of negligence that's in the road, and you drive through it because it's impossible to see, especially if it has rained, and it destroys not just the tire. It can, if you drive fast enough, it destroys the wheel. So you can't even change. You can change the wheel, but it's very damaging. Now, when people say potholes are a white people's problem, they think of white people's passenger cars. A lot of the South African economy, as I said, rail are all messed up. All we really have left are basically roads. Some trucks, the smaller trucks, like when they drive through the pothole, the same thing. The truck goes, breaks down. If that truck carried ice cream, product is gone. If it's like 35 degrees outside and it's carrying pigs, they will die. It affects all businesses. If a taxi carrying black workers drives through it, they have to stand in the sun for 3 hours, because the taxi guy doesn't have insurance. So it affects everyone, this infrastructure problem, and we should be more circumspect about it. And here's the causes: mismanagement and cadre deployment, budget underspending, corruption in tenders and maintenance contracts. So, this is so weird. Budget underspending, this is actually when they have money. Like, money has been allocated to them and to the budget, and they're so incompetent that they actually didn't get around to spending it. I lived in Centurion. This is a small town north of Pretoria and south of Johannesburg. South of Pretoria, north of Johannesburg, and there was a problem. It had this big dam, and it was a problem with the dam. It was full. It was halfway filled with silt. Now, they wanted to remove the silt, and there was a budget for it. They just never got down to like spending the budget to remove the silt. And you find this everywhere. Like, this is a frequent problem. Then you have like your plain vanilla corruption in tenders. We call them tenderpreneurs, by the way. If I haven't mentioned it already, a tenderpreneur is something like an entrepreneur. The only difference is an entrepreneur creates value and money out of nothing, whereas a tenderpreneur gets a contract because he knows someone on the inside, he or she. I'm saying there's lots of female tenderpreneurs. They get this contract because they know someone on the inside, and essentially, that's just more corruption. It weakens the state. It makes infrastructure worse because it doesn't get fixed. Then another thing I want to talk about is cadre deployment. Now, I've read I've once read, it was many years ago, 20 years ago, was an article by Professor Aubrey Matsiki, which is a very smart man, by the way, but he wrote a positive article about cadre deployment in the sense that, like, those of you who don't know what a cadre is like an ideologue, someone who adheres to the ideology of the party, who understands what the party wants to do, and so on. And he said the cadre is the only person who really understands this. So if you want something done, you need it to be done by someone who understands what the problem is, or rather understand the ideology. However, cadre deployment comes down to you get good people, you get competent cadres, you get ideologues who are very competent in their work. Let's not take it away from them. However, most of them are incompetent. That's why they're in politics, by the way. You can do better in the private sector if you're truly competent. Like, they can't do anything but like give a good speech. They can give a good speech. They are very charismatic. They can make friends easily, and they can sit down with a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue and some cigars, and they can figure out how how to basically be more incompetent and how to be more corrupt. And that's what they do. And we have a lot of that in South Africa. And it's not just the ANC. It's like the DA, the opposition party as well. They have had, it's fewer than the ANC, yes, but they also have had it. Like, to put it in perspective, like the leader of the Democratic Alliance, the opposition party, doesn't even have a tertiary education. So I'm not saying people without tertiary education is stupid. It's just that, well, I don't know, like maybe you should know more. If you're going to be a leader, maybe at least go for night classes, you know, at least like get a diploma. And he's old, he's like freaking slightly older than me, and he still hasn't done it. Like, Jesus Christ, like, what do you do with your time? Play PlayStation? In any case, the digital divide and ICT gaps. Unequal access to the internet and digital tools deepens inclusion and stunts innovation. Over 50% of South Africans lack stable broadband access. Data cost remains amongst the highest in Africa. So, yeah, once again, rural development is very important in any country because that's where you make food. We're humans. We're biological organisms, or not orgasms. We are biological organisms who have orgasms, but we're biological organisms. We need food. Food is grown in rural areas. It's not growing in urban areas. So if you're going to underinvest in a rural area, especially with like IT, or one of the main things would be IT, you have a problem. Because remember, a farmer needs to know certain information. He needs to know, like, what will the weather be like tomorrow? What will the weather be like next week? What's the price of corn at the moment? What's the price for corn predicted to be next year? He needs to all know all these things, and he needs to know it like this. Some farms are big. Like, so maybe he wants to do a voice over IP call to one of his workers. Another thing, because like these farms attacks I spoke about, what will help farmers a lot will be a better ICT system where if they are in danger, they can call for help. They can much easier get into contact with the police station, or at least their neighbors, and tell them, help, I'm under attack, come and bail me out. Now it's very difficult. You have to be like kind of a rich farmer. You have to use radio technology, and some of this radio technology is expensive. Like, my uncle's a farmer and he showed me his radio. Jesus, that thing was a motherfucker. It's like this huge radio, and he had backup radios as well, by the way. It'll be way cheaper if he could have had Starlink. But, well, he doesn't have it. And look, now it goes for villagers too. Like, if a villager wants to do a night class, if a villager wants to just relax watching TikTok, it's their right, to have these things. And now, they don't have it because you have never invested in ICT. Some of the consequences of this is a disruption to e-learning and remote work, stalled digital economic development, exclusion of informal businesses from online platforms. And here is something that you can't put on the regulatory bottlenecks in spectrum licensing. That's like a government problem. Like, it's been like this since in the last 35 years. For some reason, the government's very ineffective when it comes to issuing spectrum licenses. I don't know, like I studied like computer engineering, which included signal engineering. It's not that difficult to figure out on which signal frequency you will use and how to make the thing work, so they don't interfere. That technology is old, in fact. It comes from freaking, the 70s. So, like, basically, the fact that they can't do it is just plain incompetence. Then, the private sector has a role to play here as well, in the sense that they have monopolies. South Africa has fallen prey to monopolies from the existing service providers, like Vodacom, like MTN, and it's very expensive. Like, if you compare per megabyte sent of data, South Africa is one of the most expensive places in the world to send and receive data. Then we have municipal mismanagement and financial instability. Over 80% of municipalities are either financially distressed or dysfunctional. Some of the issues are massive irregular expenditure, over $20 billion in 2023, failure to deliver basic services like refuge, electricity and water, and Eskom debts accumulated by municipalities exceeding $500 billion. Yeah, the municipalities owe Eskom a lot of money. People have like illegal connections to the main electric line, and then, well, the municipality doesn't know about it, and they lose money. So instead of being cut off, which would be the more logical. I know cutting them off would be awful, because like some people in that suburb will actually pay for their electricity, but what choice do you have? Are you going to continue losing all this money, like, which we don't have, getting back to the fiscal deficit? What's the impacts of this? Service delivery protests, economic stagnation in smaller towns, and invested this interest in rural and peri-urban areas. So yeah, service delivery protests are a big thing in South Africa. And it's because, well, services are not being delivered because of government incompetence and corruption, inefficiency, mismanagement, ineffectiveness, and unproductiveness, and kakatocracy, like not a meritocracy. A government of the most incompetent people. Then we have a shadow economy and illicit trade. The illicit economy, including unregulated mining, contraband, and untaxed trade, undermine governance and economic stability. Examples include illegal gold mining, or we call them zamazamas in South Africa, tobacco and alcohol smuggling, informal taxis and trade in counterfeit goods. And some of these impacts are tax revenue losses, underground violence and extortion, and the weakening of the informal business environment. So, yeah, like, this is similar to the, I can't compare it to the informal economy, because this is like breaking the law. But still, you're creating a petri dish for breaking the law by being a weak state, essentially, or a failing state. South Africa is not a failed state. We are not, like many people, it's highly irritating when I travel internationally and people call South Africa a failed state. We're not a failed state. We're a failing state. If you can come up with evidence proving that South Africa is a complete failed state, please provide it to me. I'll be very interested. Then we come to the weak state capacity and administrative paralysis. The state struggles to implement policy, enforce laws, and maintain functional bureaucracies. There's high vacancy rates in technical departments, low consequence management and poor performance, delays in infrastructure rollouts and grant disbursements. The causes are cadre deployment and politicization of administration, fragmented and intergovernmental coordinations. Once again, basically, education feeds into this one. So we don't have enough educated people to battle this weak state capacity. Basically, and then once again, inefficiency, unproductivity, ineffectiveness, and no meritocracy. So, and this is because of cadre deployment. Cadre deployment is, cadre, for those of you who are international, cadre is C-A-D-R-E. C-A-D-R-E. That's how you spell it. Cadre deployment probably, if cadre deployment can disappear tomorrow, God knows, but I predict South Africa will immediately function like 20 or 30% better. Just because you remove the greedy, incompetent, stupid, like retarded, fat people from government, and you bring in people who can actually do the job, or even if they're half educated, if they are driven and if they're intelligent and driven, intelligent, hungry for success, like ambitious, patriotic towards the country, not the party, the country, not the party, not the country, if they're patriotic for the country, it will succeed. South Africa will succeed. But these cadres, oh Jesus Christ, like they've got their Mercedes Benzes, like they sit there with their fancy clothes, and they're fat. They're all super obese. Like they're disgusting. Like I've got zero sympathy for cadres. Like zero love for them. Like maybe I got very close to slander here because I can make a name list. There is and finally, there's low investment confidence and there's capital outflows. Domestic and foreign investors lack confidence due to government concerns, energy crises, and policy unpredictability. Food capital inflation, fixed capital formation is below 15% of GDP. I think Professor Frans Cronje said, I don't really know what fixed capital formation is, but he said this should be 25%. And if this 15% can go to 25%, then you will see something like a 3 or a 5% economic growth, which is what we need in South Africa to get out of the shit. Like, there's many ways to get out of the shit, but one of the biggest is like just investment. It's just money flowing into the country. Junk status credit ratings from Moody's, Fitch, and S&P persist. So it was initiated by the Ayeye president, Jacob Zuma, but the guy following him was not really great, Cyril Ramaphosa. There's it seems, is yet to be determined by the courts. It seems that there might have been money laundering. Anyone who launders money already isn't thinking about the greater good. He's thinking about himself or herself. So, there's you're not fully concentrating on the job. He's not as decisive as, let's say, Thabo Mbeki was. Thabo Mbeki was very decisive. If he didn't like you, you're fired. If he thinks you're stupid, he'll tell you you're stupid. If he thinks you're corrupt, he basically will fire you. The causes of like this low investment confidence and capital outflows are regulatory volatility in mining, telecoms, and finance, state capture, the state capture legacy and corruption, and infrastructure collapse of Eskom and logistics, which is closely related to state capture, but also related once again to caterism. Impacts of all of this: limited innovation and job creation, rand's depreciation and inflation pressure, failure to meet developmental finance goals. So yeah, South Africa is a mixed economy. We have neoliberal, capitalist, socialist, and Marxist elements. However, that's not the problem per se. The problem is that we are tolerating all the stupidity, we are tolerating threats, we're tolerating criminality, we're tolerating aggressive unions. We are tolerating cadres. We are tolerating ayeye presidents. We are tolerating stupid politicians. We are tolerating fat, stinking politicians. We are tolerating seeing how the country breaks down in front of us and just shrugging and saying, oh, but we're South Africa and we can survive everything. Yeah, just wait until we're Venezuela, and then you'll see if you can survive everything. And I'll bet you won't, because there's still a huge fucking difference between South Africa and Venezuela. Because as I said just earlier, we are a failing state. We're not a failed state. Venezuela is a failed state. Somalia is a failed state. Zimbabwe is a failed state. Wait until we are there. And then tell me oh, we're South Africans, we can survive all of this. Because you hear that often. And I believe we are way too complacent. And I understand, look, I get it. People have different ideas about how to solve all of this. All I'm doing in this video is I'm laying out very serious problems. Okay, some are less serious than others, but maybe the potholes are not so bad. But violent crime is pretty serious. So we should, if you're a South African and you want to make a difference, there's many ways you can make a difference, but I would say the quickest way would be to find out whoever is your ward councillor. In other words, the person who controls your municipality, who controls the area you live in, and you find them, and you go to their house, and you knock on their door, and you tell them, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? Okay, you did it, you tell me. Show me the email. Show me the evidence of what you have done. And really hold them accountable. Because they're not being accountable. And if the next election comes, don't have the stupid attitude of, because it is a stupid attitude of that your vote doesn't matter. I'm going to make the following analogy. If you buy a lotto ticket, okay, a lottery ticket, then the probability of you winning would be 1 in a billion, one in 10 million, okay? That's the probability. But if you don't buy a lottery ticket, the probability is mathematically zero. That's just a fact. So unless you want to use quantum physics and parallel universes, but let's not go there, you can find a party that you can align with. And I strongly suggest you do your research about these parties. And I strongly suggest you avoid any party that shows signs of nepotism, caderism, being ideologues, any form of incompetence, any form of extremism, because we need to get investors back. And I will strongly advise you to go and look at these small parties in the center that are both socialist and capitalist at the same time, because we need a diversified model to get out of this nonsense. I will advise you to find them, thoroughly read their manifestos and vote for those people. Because it's only by getting rid of the retarded politicians we have now can we make a difference. So if you do that, investment is coming. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.